Here is the rewritten script, maintaining 100% of the original content, logic, and length while following your specific formatting requirements. What if I told you that one of the most vital nutrients for your heart, your brain, and your entire body is not exclusively locked away inside fish? Dozens of humble plants growing in gardens, along walkways, and quietly in your own pantry carry it as well. Most people have no idea. They assume omega-3 exists only in salmon and in small golden fish oil capsules from the pharmacy. However, today, I am going to show you 20 plants that will completely transform the way you think about this essential fat forever. Stay tuned, because number 6 is a common garden weed that most people pull out and discard. Yet, it contains more omega-3 than any leafy green ever recorded. And number 14 is a bright yellow field flower you have driven past 100 times without ever realizing its quiet secret. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a like, because we post new videos every single week about growing, eating, and living better through plants. You do not want to miss what is coming. So, let us get into it. Here are 20 omega-3 rich plants that most people never eat, ranked from the everyday and overlooked to the rare and truly remarkable. Before we begin, one honest and important note, because I always want to be transparent with you. The omega-3 found in plants is mostly a form called alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA for short. Your body can use it directly, and research suggests it may support heart and brain health on its own. But it is not the exact same thing as the marine omega-3s found in fish, and the human body converts it only slowly and in small amounts. So, think of every plant on this list as part of a healthy, balanced lifestyle, not as a replacement for anything your doctor recommends. With that said, let us meet these 20 forgotten treasures, one by one. Flaxseed, the ancient blue-flowered seed that started it all. Here is something most people miss entirely. This tiny brown or golden seed is quite possibly the single richest plant source of omega-3 on the entire planet. Flax has been grown by human hands for at least 30,000 years, making it one of the oldest cultivated crops we know of. The ancient Egyptians wrapped their dead in fine linen, woven from its fibers, while eating its little seeds for daily nourishment. A single tablespoon of ground flaxseed carries around 2 g of alpha-linolenic acid, which is more omega-3 than most people manage to get in an entire day. And this is where things get interesting. The seed must be ground to release its treasure. Whole flax seeds are so tough that they often pass right through the body completely undigested, carrying all their precious omega-3 right along with them. Our great-grandmothers understood this instinctively and ground it fresh whenever they needed it. One practical tip: store your ground flax in the refrigerator in a sealed jar, because those delicate oils turn rancid quickly once they meet air, light, and warmth. This is not just a seed. It is the original omega-3 powerhouse hiding in plain sight on the baking aisle of every grocery store. Chia seeds. The tiny Aztec seed that once fueled warriors. You have probably seen chia floating in trendy smoothies and thick little puddings. But here is what most people do not realize. Long before it became a modern health food darling, chia was a sacred staple of the Aztec and Mayan peoples of Central America. The very name comes from an ancient word, meaning strength. Warriors, hunters, and long-distance runners were said to carry small pouches of these seeds with them on grueling journeys, relying on them for steady energy. Just 1 oz of chia, which is about 22 tbpsp, delivers over 5 gd of alpha-linolenic acid, making it one of the most concentrated plant sources of omega-3 you can possibly find. And here is why that matters so much. Chia can absorb many times its own weight in liquid, swelling up into a soft, satisfying gel that makes it wonderfully easy to eat in generous amounts. Simply stir a spoonful into water, juice, or oatmeal, and let it sit for 10 or 15 minutes until it thickens. This is exactly why modern gardeners and homesteaders are rediscovering a humble food that ancient civilizations understood and honored all along. That is the hidden power of this tiny seed. Walnuts, the brain-shaped nut with an ancient secret. Look closely at a shelled walnut, and you will notice it looks remarkably like a tiny human brain. A resemblance that fascinated old-world healers for centuries under the ancient idea that a plant's shape hinted at what it might help. Whether or not you put any stock in that old folklore, the modern science here is absolutely real. Walnuts are the only common tree nut that actually qualifies as an excellent source of plant-based omega-3. A single Wandiwano's handful provides about 2 g of alpha-linolenic acid, a genuinely impressive amount. This is why our ancestors valued them so highly, storing them carefully through long, cold winters as a dense, portable, and reliable form of nourishment. But here is what most people miss. Those same fragile, healthy oils mean that walnuts can go stale surprisingly fast. Buy them as fresh as you can, keep them cool and sealed, and always taste one before you trust the batch. A rancid walnut has a sharp, bitter flavor and is best thrown out. Think of them not merely as a snack, but as one of the most dependable omega-3 foods you can actually grow on a tree in your own backyard. Hemp seeds, the misunderstood seed with perfect balance. Let us clear something up right away because there is a lot of needless confusion here. The hemp seeds sold as food, often called hemp hearts, will not affect your mind in any way whatsoever. What they will do is deliver a beautifully balanced dose of healthy fats. A 3 TBSP serving offers roughly 3 GD of alpha-linolenic acid, along with a generous helping of complete plant protein and a big dose of magnesium. And this is where things get interesting. Hemp carries its omega-3 and omega-6 fats in a ratio that many nutrition researchers consider close to ideal for the human body. Something genuinely rare in the plant world. For countless centuries, hemp was one of the single most useful crops a homestead could possibly grow, feeding people while also providing strong fiber for rope, sailcloth, and clothing. Then it fell out of favor for reasons that had almost nothing to do with its nutrition. Today, it is quietly returning to kitchens, sprinkled over yogurt, blended into homemade milk, and stirred into countless dishes. That is the hidden power of this deeply misunderstood little seed, perilla, the Asian herb with the highest omega-3 of all. Here is a plant that almost no one in the West has ever tasted, and honestly, that is a real shame. Perilla, sometimes called shiso, is a fragrant leafy herb in the mint family that has been treasured in Korean, Japanese, and Chinese cooking for many centuries. But here is the genuinely surprising part. Perilla seed oil contains one of the highest proportions of alpha-linolenic acid of any plant oil ever studied by scientists, often somewhere between 54% and 64% pure omega-3. That places it right up there alongside flax and chia at the very top of the entire plant kingdom. In Korea, the broadleaves are used to wrap grilled foods, and the roasted seeds are ground into rich, savory sauces and seasonings. Research is being conducted on perilla for its anti-inflammatory properties, though I want to be clear that it remains a food, not a medicine. So, why did most of the Western world simply forget it? For the simple reason that it never crossed the ocean into everyday gardens. But perilla actually grows quite easily in American soil, and adventurous homesteaders are just beginning to plant it again. This is why modern gardeners are rediscovering this genuinely remarkable herb. That is the hidden power of this forgotten plant. Purslane. the sidewalk weed that beats every leafy green. Now, here is the one I promised you at the very start, and it may just be the most surprising plant on this entire list. Purslane is a low, sprawling succulent with fleshy, paddle-shaped leaves and reddish stems. And the vast majority of people yank it right out of their gardens as a nuisance weed without ever giving it a second thought. But here is what most people completely miss. Purslane holds more omega-3 than any other leafy vegetable ever measured by science. Roughly 300 to 400 milliliters of alpha-linolenic acid per 100 gram of fresh leaves. That is around 5 times more omega-3 than you would find in spinach. And it gets even stranger. Purslane is one of the only land plants on the entire Earth that contains even trace amounts of the long-chain marine omega-3s, usually found only in fish and algae. Our ancestors across the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and Mexico ate it happily and gratefully for thousands of years. It has a crisp, pleasantly lemony bite, and it is wonderful eaten raw in a fresh salad. One gentle safety note here, purslane does contain natural oxalates, so those who are prone to kidney stones may want to enjoy it in moderation. And please, always be completely certain of your plant identification before eating anything you find growing wild. That is the hidden power of this humble little weed, growing free between your tomato plants right now. Sacha inchi, the star-shaped seed of the rainforest. Deep in the lush Amazon rainforest grows a climbing vine that produces curious little star-shaped pods. And tucked inside those pods sits one of nature's very finest plant omega-3 sources. The indigenous peoples of Peru have carefully cultivated Sacha inchi for hundreds, and quite possibly thousands, of years. When roasted, these seeds taste rich and deeply nutty, almost like a cross between a peanut and an almond. Here is why that matters. Sacha inchi is exceptionally high in alpha-linolenic acid, and a single serving can offer nearly 3 times the omega-3 found in the same amount of walnuts. On top of that, it also carries plenty of plant protein and vitamin E, which conveniently helps protect those delicate oils from spoiling. For countless generations, this was essentially a jungle secret, entirely unknown beyond the villages that quietly grew it. Now, it is finally appearing on the shelves of health food shops as a crunchy, satisfying snack. This is not just a seed. It is a genuine piece of ancient rainforest wisdom finally reaching the wider world. That is the hidden power of this star-shaped treasure. Camelina, the forgotten grain of old Europe. Here is a plant with a name that most people have honestly never even heard. And yet it fed the people of Europe for thousands of years. Camelina, sometimes called false flax or gold of pleasure, was grown widely across the continent as far back as the Bronze Age. Then modern industrial agriculture pushed it aside in favor of a handful of other crops, and it very nearly vanished from human memory altogether. But here is the surprising part. Camelina seeds press into an oil that is genuinely rich in alpha-linolenic acid, often around 35 to 45% omega-3. And unlike fragile flax oil, this oil is remarkably stable, naturally resisting the rancidity that spoils so many other omega-3 oils so quickly. That stability made it absolutely precious to farmers who had no refrigeration to rely on. This is why our ancestors valued it so deeply, and this is exactly why sustainable farmers are now bringing it back today, drawn to a tough, hardy crop that happily thrives even in poor soil with very little water. That is the hidden power of this forgotten old-world grain. If you are starting to see the pattern here, if you are beginning to realize that some of the most powerful omega-3 plants have been hiding in plain sight this whole time, in weeds, in old grains, in seeds our ancestors knew by heart, then do me one small favor. Hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who love plants, gardening, natural living, and the kind of old wisdom that still works beautifully today. And if you have not subscribed yet, go ahead and click that subscribe button and ring that little bell. We are building a real warm community here, and I would truly love to have you as a part of it. Now, let us keep going, because the next 12 plants are every bit as fascinating as the first 8. Soybeans, the ancient bean hiding a modern surprise. Most people think of soybeans only as animal feed, or as some mysterious ingredient buried in processed foods, and they would never in 100 years imagine this humble legume as a source of omega-3. But here is what most people miss. Soybeans, and especially their young green cousins known as edamame, carry a genuinely meaningful amount of alpha-linolenic acid. A single cup of cooked edamame provides around 1/3 of a gram of omega-3 alongside a full and satisfying serving of complete plant protein. And this is where things get interesting. Soybeans have been carefully cultivated in East Asia for well over 3,000 years, so revered that they were counted among the 5 sacred grains of ancient China. Whole soy foods like edamame, tofu, and tempeh carry not just omega-3, but also plenty of fiber and important minerals. Somewhere along the way, in the great rush of modern food processing, we simply forgot that the whole unprocessed bean itself was always the real treasure. This is why traditional cultures valued the simple soybean all along. That is the hidden power of this ancient bean. Brussels sprouts, the little cabbage most people underestimate. Here is a vegetable that gets a genuinely bad reputation at the dinner table, and yet it quietly holds a real secret. Brussels sprouts, those tiny green cabbages that grow clustered along a tall central stalk, contain a surprising amount of omega-3 for a vegetable. A 100g cooked serving carries roughly 170 mg of alpha-linolenic acid. Now, that may sound modest next to something like flax, but for a common everyday vegetable, it is genuinely remarkable. Here is why that matters. You eat your vegetables in cups, not in tiny tablespoons, so all those milligrams really do add up over the course of a full meal. Brussels sprouts were cultivated in Northern Europe for many centuries, especially prized for their ability to survive cold weather, when almost nothing else would grow. The real reason so many people claim to dislike them is actually quite simple. For generations, they were boiled into a soggy, sulfurous mush. But roast them until they turn crisp and caramelized on the edges, and you unlock both wonderful flavor and real nourishment. That is the hidden power of this badly underestimated little cabbage. Pumpkin seeds, the autumn treasure we usually throw away. Every single fall, millions of people carve their pumpkins and toss the seeds straight into the trash, without a thought. What a genuine waste that is. Those seeds, sometimes called pepitas, are absolutely dense with nutrition, including a modest but worthwhile amount of plant omega-3 alongside a healthy dose of magnesium, zinc, and quality protein. The native peoples of the Americas cultivated pumpkins and squash for thousands of years, and they never once discarded the seeds. They roasted them, ground them into meal, and stored them carefully for the lean winter months ahead. Here is one honest note I owe you. Pumpkin seeds actually carry more omega-6 than omega-3, so they truly work best as one part of a varied, balanced diet, rather than as a standalone omega-3 source. Still, this is exactly why our ancestors valued the whole plant, wasting absolutely nothing that could nourish them. So next autumn, rinse those seeds, toss them with a little salt and oil, and roast them until golden. That is the hidden power of this forgotten seasonal treasure. Spinach, the everyday green with a quiet gift. Here is a leafy green sitting on the shelf of nearly every grocery store in the country, and yet most people never once think of it as an omega-3 food. But spinach, while it lags far behind purslane, still offers a small and genuine amount of alpha-linolenic acid, around 50 milligrams per 100 grams of leaves. And this is where things get interesting. Because we tend to eat spinach in large, generous handfuls, blended into thick smoothies, or wilted down into warm dishes, all those little amounts quietly accumulate. Spinach traveled all the way from ancient Persia, across the entire world, prized by cooks and folk healers alike for its dark, iron-rich leaves. Think of it as a gentle, everyday contributor to your omega-3 intake, rather than a shining superstar. Eat it raw, or only very lightly cooked to help preserve those delicate, healthy fats. This is why modern gardeners keep spinach in the ground from the earliest days of spring. A reliable green that quietly does far more good than most people ever realize. That is the hidden power of this everyday leaf. Kidney beans. The humble bean with hidden fats. Beans are rightly famous for their protein and their fiber, but almost nobody on Earth thinks of them as a source of healthy fats. Here is what most people miss. Kidney beans and their close cousins, the creamy little navy beans, contain small amounts of alpha-linolenic acid tucked quietly away inside them. On their own, the numbers are certainly modest, but beans are a genuine daily food in traditional diets. Eaten in large, generous portions all across the Americas, the Mediterranean, and far beyond. Here is why that matters. A food that you eat often and in real quantities adds up over time in ways that a rare and expensive delicacy never possibly could. Our ancestors built entire cuisines and cultures around beans precisely because they were cheap, easily storable, and deeply nourishing through hard times. Simmer them low and slow, the good old-fashioned way, and you get a hearty meal that has faithfully fed families through hardship for centuries. This is not just a bean. It is quiet, everyday nourishment that most people overlook completely. That is the hidden power of this humble legume. Canola, the bright yellow field with an omega-3 secret. You have surely driven past entire fields of brilliant, glowing yellow flowers without ever knowing what they were. That is the canola plant, a member of the very same cabbage family. And here is the one I promised you way back at the beginning. The oil pressed from its small seeds is one of the more affordable and genuinely accessible plant sources of omega-3 in the ordinary kitchen. A single tablespoon of canola oil provides well over a full gram of alpha-linolenic acid. And this is where things get interesting. Because it is so mild in flavor and so inexpensive, it slips quietly into everyday cooking almost completely unnoticed, adding omega-3 where richer, pricier oils rarely reach. The plant itself was carefully refined from the older rapeseed by Canadian farmers back in the 1970s. Choose a cold-pressed version whenever you possibly can, and avoid overheating it, since high heat quickly damages those fragile beneficial fats. That is the hidden power of this ordinary golden field flower. Mustard greens, the peppery leaf of the Old South. Here is a leafy green with wonderfully deep roots in traditional cooking, especially all across the South. And yet, very few people know that it carries omega-3. Mustard greens, the spicy, peppery leaves of the very same plant that gives us the familiar yellow condiment, contain a respectable amount of alpha-linolenic acid for a leafy vegetable, more in fact than many of the milder, blander greens. Here is why that matters. Generations of home cooks simmered these greens slowly for hours, seasoning them with real care, transforming a humble backyard plant into a beloved and comforting dish. Mustard has been grown for thousands of years across Asia, Europe, and Africa, valued both as everyday food and as a trusted folk remedy. This is exactly why our ancestors planted it so faithfully. It grows fast, it thrives happily in cool weather, and it delivers bold, unforgettable flavor right alongside real nourishment. That is the hidden power of this peppery old-time green. Seaweed and algae, the ocean plant that started the whole chain. Now, here is a plant that completely changes the entire story we have been telling. Have you ever stopped to wonder how fish actually get their omega-3 in the first place? Because here is the truth. They do not make it themselves at all. They eat algae. That is right. The tiny marine plants at the very bottom of the ocean food chain are the true original source of the long-chain marine omega-3s that everyone stubbornly credits to fish. And this is where things get genuinely interesting. Certain algae and edible seaweeds carry those very same marine omega-3s directly, completely skipping those fish middlemen entirely. Coastal peoples in Japan, Korea, Wales, and Ireland have harvested seaweed for many centuries, weaving it thoughtfully into their soups, breads, and daily meals. Algae-based supplements made from these humble little plants are now one of the only fully plant-based ways to get the marine forms of omega-3 directly. This is not just a plant, it is the very origin of the whole omega-3 story, quietly growing down in the sea long before any fish ever swam past it. That is the hidden power of this ocean plant. Echium, the blue-flowered plant few have ever heard of. Here is a plant so genuinely obscure that most gardeners have never once spoken its name aloud, and yet it hides a truly special kind of omega-3. Echium, sometimes called viper's bugloss, produces striking blue and purple flowers that honeybees absolutely adore. But here is the surprising part. Its seed oil contains a rarer form of omega-3 that the human body may be able to convert more readily than the ordinary kind found in most other plants. For many centuries, this wildflower grew abundantly across Europe, admired for its beauty and quietly used in old folk traditions. Only fairly recently have researchers begun studying its unusual oil more closely and carefully. So why on earth did we forget it? Simply because it was seen as nothing more than a pretty roadside weed, easily overlooked. But this is precisely why curious homesteaders and thoughtful herbalists are now giving it a genuinely fresh look. That is the hidden power of this forgotten blue-flowered plant. Kale. The mighty leaf everyone knows for the wrong reasons. Kale became wildly famous as a health food, endlessly praised for its vitamins and its fiber. But almost nobody ever mentions its omega-3. Here is what most people miss. A single cup of cooked kale contains a small but very real amount of alpha-linolenic acid, adding just one more quiet benefit to an already remarkably generous plant. And this is where things get interesting. Kale is actually one of the very oldest cultivated greens in all of human history, faithfully feeding people across Europe for more than 2,000 years, long before the familiar head cabbage was ever even developed. It thrives beautifully in cold weather, and it actually grows sweeter and more tender after a hard frost, which made it a genuine lifeline in old winter gardens. This is exactly why our ancestors planted it right up against the coming snow. Grow just a few plants in your own backyard garden, and you can harvest fresh, tender leaves through much of the year. That is the hidden power of this ancient, hardy, humble leaf. Chlorella and spirulina, the tiny green powders packed with life. Here are two of the very smallest plants on our entire list. So small, in fact, that you could never see a single one of them with your naked eye. Chlorella and spirulina are microscopic algae sold as deep green powders, and they have quietly become some of the most nutrient-dense foods known to humankind. Here is why that matters. Along with generous amounts of protein, iron, and antioxidants, these little algae also contain omega-3 fatty acids, part of the very same marine family that fish quietly borrow from the sea. Traditional peoples living around certain lakes in Africa and Central America actually harvested spirulina straight from the water and dried it into cakes many centuries ago. Research is being studied on these algae for various supportive roles in the body, though I want to be clear, once again, that they remain foods, not cures. One gentle note: always choose a trusted, tested, reputable source, since algae naturally absorb whatever happens to be in the water around them. Stir just a small spoonful into a morning smoothie, and you carry an ancient lake tradition right into your day. That is the hidden power of these tiny green plants. Avocado, the creamy fruit that saves the best for last. We finish our journey with a plant that nearly everyone already loves, but almost no one ever associates with omega-3. The avocado is rich, buttery, and rightly famous for its healthy fats. And while it contains only a modest amount of alpha-linolenic acid itself, it truly earns its place on this list for one special reason. Here is why that matters. Those wonderful healthy fats actively help your body absorb the fat-soluble nutrients found in all the other plants on this very list. Eat your fresh purslane salad with a few creamy slices of avocado, and you genuinely help your body unlock everything within it. The avocado has been lovingly cultivated in Mexico and Central America for many thousands of years, so deeply treasured that ancient people sometimes buried it right alongside their dead. This is exactly why our ancestors valued it as something almost sacred. So think of it not as the biggest omega-3 source on our list, but as the perfect creamy companion that quietly makes all the others work even better. That is the hidden power of this ancient, beloved fruit. If you made it all the way to the very end of this video, then you now know something that most people out there completely miss. Omega-3 is simply not locked away inside fish alone. It is growing right now in the weeds between your garden rows, sitting in the old grains our ancestors patiently ground into their daily bread, hiding quietly in seeds, in beans, in leaves, and even in the tiny algae drifting at the very bottom of the sea. These plants are not just old stories and dusty folklore. They are useful, they are powerful, and they are truly worth rediscovering, especially as part of a healthy, varied, and balanced lifestyle. So here is what I want you to do right now. Smash that like button if this video genuinely changed the way you think about omega-3 and about all the ordinary plants growing around you every day. Then, drop a comment down below and tell me which one of these 20 plants surprised you the most. Are you Team Purslane, Team Perilla, or Team Sacha Inchi? I read every single comment, and I truly love hearing from you. We are building a real community here of people who understand a simple, powerful truth that some of the very best answers to our modern health questions are still growing quietly in gardens, in open fields, in forgotten weedy corners, and in the deep old wisdom of the plants our ancestors never once stopped trusting. If this exploration of nature's hidden nutrients has changed the way you look at the greenery in your own backyard, please subscribe and like the video. We are unearthing the botanical history and health secrets that have been overlooked for too long. Join us as we plant the seeds for a healthier future. Our next deep dive into nature's treasure trove is coming soon.